Tonight, if you find that your mind is still carrying the scattered echoes of a long day, overlapping thoughts, unanswered questions, or simply a quiet fatigue with no clear name, know that you are not alone. We live in a world that moves too quickly. Everything pulls us forward while somewhere deep inside a quieter part of us longs to slow down. This video does not arrive to teach you something you must remember. It does not ask you to understand, to concentrate, or to keep up. Instead, it offers a very gentle invitation, a slow journey into the silent geometry of the universe, where space is allowed to curve, time is permitted to stretch, and your own mind is free to soften. Here, general relativity does not appear as a dry or distant theory, but as a whispered story about how the universe carries all motion within it, a place where nothing is truly pulled, only moving quietly along its natural path, perhaps not unlike you. As Einstein once quietly suggested, reality is merely an illusion, albeit a very persistent one. And so if you are ready, allow your eyes to close for a moment. Let your breath slow, and step with me into a space where you do not need to be anyone at all, only to be here within the gentle curvature of time and to let sleep arrive when it wishes. Night does not begin when the sky grows dark, but when you allow yourself to stop trying to keep up. Perhaps all day today you have been moving too fast, not only with your body, but with your thoughts. Ideas piling onto ideas, obligations that never quite release their grip, and a quiet unease that if you were to pause, you might miss something important. But in this moment, there is nothing that needs to be held tightly. The first chapter of this journey does not open with a grand question, but with a very small permission. You are allowed to step out of the rhythm of the day without asking approval from anyone, not even from yourself. The space around you remains, but it no longer demands a response. Sounds drift farther away. The distance between thoughts begins to stretch. And time, the thing that urges you forward in daylight, suddenly softens, as if it too has grown tired. In philosophy, there is a very old idea that human beings do not find truth by tensing themselves, but by letting go. As Marcus Aurelius once wrote in Meditations, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." But tonight, that strength does not need to be used. You do not need to control your mind. You only need to let it drift more slowly than usual. The story you're about to enter is not told to be remembered. It is not told to be fully understood. It is told the way a river passes over stone, quietly, continuously, leaving no sharp trace behind. If something stays with you, it will stay on its own. And if it fades, letting it dissolve is perfectly fine. In this moment, when you no longer have to carry today with you and you do not yet need to step into tomorrow, you only need to be here, in the slowing, in the stillness, and in a story that does not require you to remain awake in order to continue. When human beings begin to seek an understanding of gravity, it marks a subtle transition from rest into a more primal kind of curiosity. It gently stirs a question that is ancient, not a scientific one, but a human one, born the first time someone lifted their eyes to the sky and wondered, why do things fall, and why do the stars not fall, when the rhythm of the day has receded and the space around you no longer asks for a response? A very old question drifts upward so light that without listening you might miss it. Why do things fall? This is not the question of a laboratory, but of a person standing very still, watching a leaf detach from a branch. A stone meet the ground, and the night sky hold its points of light unmoving, unfallen. Long before science, humans lived alongside this question, not to answer it, but to dwell with it. They watched the stars move slowly through the seasons. They watched the moon return in familiar cycles. They watched the earth receive everything that fell as if an invisible hand were always waiting below. From those earliest observations, the universe did not appear chaotic. It had rhythm, repetition, order. But it was an order that did not explain itself. Ancient civilizations told stories to fill that silence. Gods pulled the heavens. The spirit of the earth called all things home. Sky and ground spoke through invisible threads. These stories were not wrong. They were simply different ways of living with what could not yet be understood. In philosophy, the desire to find laws has never been only a desire for control. It is a desire to belong. As Aristotle wrote in Metaphysics, all men by nature desire to know. But to know here does not necessarily mean to grasp or possess. Sometimes it simply means wanting to live in a world that can be listened to. When people observed the movements of the planets, they were not only measuring orbits, they were asking whether their own existence might also follow some unseen path. When they watched objects fall, they did not see only force. They saw a return. Perhaps this is why gravity has always carried a particular resonance in the human mind. It does not only pull bodies, it draws the question of where we belong. In the quiet darkness of night, as you lie very still and feel your body held by the earth, you are experiencing what your ancestors felt tens of thousands of years ago. No names, no formulas, just the sense that you are not slipping away into nothingness. The philosopher Simone Weil once wrote, "Gravity and grace are the two most fundamental forces in the universe." She was not speaking of physics. She was speaking of the feeling of existence. Gravity, in that sense, is not only what pulls you downward, it is what allows you to remain. And within that remaining, human beings begin to dream of hidden laws, not to break the sky open, but to understand why it remains above us while everything else falls. These questions have been carried from one night to the next across civilizations through eyes that gazed at the same sky while speaking different languages. They did not need immediate answers. They only needed to continue existing. And now, as you are here within this thin stillness, where awareness begins to soften you too, are standing within that current. You do not need to understand what gravity is. You only need to sense that some order is holding everything together. And as your mind slows, those questions slow with it. They no longer demand solutions. They simply whisper the way the sky has always whispered to human beings long before anyone learned how to name it. From here, we will continue not to answer, but to listen more deeply to the way the universe has always moved in quiet, patient ways. Newton's world is the moment when the universe becomes clear, orderly, and reassuring. After the primal observations of earlier chapters, humanity finds an explanatory framework strong enough to place every motion into order. Gravity is named as an invisible force. Space becomes a neutral, flat stage. Time flows steadily and absolutely. The Newtonian world is not loud nor excessively mysterious. It works. It predicts accurately. It offers a sense of safety almost complete. The questions from before do not disappear. They simply find a place to rest. After centuries of watching sky and earth, humanity enters a rare moment in history when the world seems willing to be understood. In Newton's world, everything falls into place. Objects fall because a force pulls them. Planets move because they are governed by that same force. Space stretches wide, flat, and silent like a neutral stage on which matter performs its dance. And time simply flows, evenly, indifferent to who is observing, unbiased toward any place. It is a world that feels easy to breathe in. In such a world, if you know the position and velocity of an object, you can know where it will be next. If you understand the forces acting upon it, you can predict the future. No gods are required to pull the stars. No stories are needed to fill the gaps. Only laws. Isaac Newton wrote in Principia, "I frame no hypotheses," a short sentence carrying an entire attitude. Do not speculate beyond what can be measured. Do not tell stories when mathematics is sufficient. In that moment, the universe becomes a finely tuned machine, not a noisy one, but a machine that operates in silence. There is a deep comfort in this way of seeing. If the universe follows laws, then your existence is not entirely accidental. If every motion has a cause, then your being here can belong to a larger order. In the quiet of night, that thought alone is enough to let the mind loosen. You can lie very still, feel your body held by the earth, and trust that this force has been calculated long ago. Nothing unusual is happening. Nothing needs to be worried about. The Newtonian world is a world in which everything is in its proper place. Yet within that perfection, there is something faint that need not yet be named. Gravity in this model is a force acting at a distance. It pulls but does not touch. It is present yet without form. Space, though flat and calm, does not participate in the story. It is simply there, unaffected, unchanged. Time is the same. It flows like a river that pays no attention to who stands on its banks. This model works almost flawlessly. It carries ships far. It makes calendars precise. It explains nearly everything people see, and so no one is in a hurry to question it. In philosophy, the best systems are often those that allow us to forget them. They work quietly in the background so the mind can rest. Perhaps that is why Newton's world endured for so long, not because it was absolutely correct, but because it was correct enough to feel safe. In the night, when you no longer wish to question, no longer wish to stretch awareness outward, such a world is an ideal place to take shelter. You do not need to think about curved space. You do not need to worry about stretched time. You only need to know that everything is functioning in familiar ways. And yet, at the far edges of this picture, there are small motions that do not quite fit. They make no noise. They do not collapse the system. They only whisper that there may be another way of seeing. This is not the moment to listen to them. For now, let this world do what it does best, keep everything stable. Let gravity be the invisible but reliable hand. Let flat space open wide enough for sleep. Let time flow evenly, unhurried. We will travel farther, but not yet. For now, Newton's world is a very quiet place. The smallest crack in a perfect picture is the most delicate moment of the entire journey. There is no collapse, No rejection, no crisis, only a very slight discrepancy so small that without patience it would pass unnoticed. It respects the stability of Newton's world while still allowing something that does not fully align to exist. Mercury does not destroy the system. It simply refuses to remain silent. Philosophy here does not arise from answers, but from the persistence of a question. A system can be right in almost every case and still not be the whole of reality. And it is often these small differences which do not vanish over time that signal a deeper layer waiting to be heard. They awaken curiosity without startling it, planting a faint sense of misalignment gentle enough to soften the mind, not sharp enough to create tension. Newton's world has done its work well. It operates steadily. It predicts accurately. It is orderly enough that human beings can live within it without constantly looking up at the sky in worry. And then very quietly, something small refuses to stay still. Not a shock, not a major contradiction, just a slight deviation in the orbit of Mercury. A small planet circling very close to the sun, repeating its motion again and again. Everything is calculated. Every force is included in the model. And almost everything fits, but not entirely. There is a tiny part of that motion that will not disappear, no matter how many times it is measured, no matter how carefully the model is refined. The discrepancy is not large enough to cause alarm. It is only large enough to remain. In science, such discrepancies are often treated as noise. In philosophy, they are often invitations. Not invitations to change immediately, but invitations to listen more closely. What is remarkable is this: the world continues to function. The planets keep turning. People continue to sleep peacefully beneath the familiar sky. Nothing demands urgent repair. There is only a quiet sense that the perfect picture may not be the final one. Inner life unfolds in much the same way. There are systems of belief that have carried us for a long time. They explain most things. They keep the mind stable and ordered. And then one day, a very small experience does not quite fit. A feeling that refuses to fade. A question that returns again and again without causing pain, only a slight misalignment. We often try to fix it, rationalize it, ignore it. But sometimes the fact that it does not disappear is precisely what matters. Mercury does not prove Newton wrong. It only says that something has not yet been seen. In Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote, "There are indeed things that cannot be put into words. They make themselves manifest. They are what is mystical. Such things do not arrive with loud sounds. They reveal themselves through persistent differences. In the night when you lie very still and your mind has slowed enough to stop trying to explain everything, you may sense this kind of difference. A feeling that your life is functioning well, that things are in order, and yet something sits just slightly off its orbit. It does not need to be named. It does not need to be fixed. It only needs to be allowed to remain. In science, small cracks like this are where new theories begin. In life, they are where awareness becomes more humble. Not everything needs to be sealed shut. Not every question requires an immediate answer. Sometimes simply knowing that the perfect picture may have a deeper layer beneath it is enough. Mercury continues to circle. The discrepancy continues to remain, and the world somehow becomes wider, not because it loses order, but because it allows what is not yet clear to exist without being erased. As you drift towards sleep, this thought may stay with you as a very gentle comfort that if there is something in your life that does not quite fit, it is not necessarily a flaw. It may simply be the quiet sign of a deeper structure waiting to be recognized. We will continue, but there is no need to hurry. Tonight, it is enough to know that even within the most stable systems, the universe still leaves room for what has not yet been named. After the very small crack, what becomes necessary is not to patch the old system, but to ask the question from a different direction. Einstein did not try to repair gravity. He questioned the very way we had named it. When gravity is no longer a force, when space and time are no longer fixed and unmoving, reality itself, once rigid and solid, begins to soften. It introduces a feeling of safe dissolution. Not collapse, but release. Philosophy here persuades not through argument, but through the quiet permission for the world to become flexible and for the mind to become flexible with it. At the edge of the old picture where the small discrepancies continue to linger, there are two ways forward. One is to keep adjusting, refining the model, correcting the numbers, hoping everything will eventually fit again. The other way is more difficult, but quieter, to ask the question anew. Albert Einstein chose the second path. He did not begin by asking how gravity works, but with a different question, softer and deeper. Is gravity truly a force at all? That was the moment the world began to change. Not because something was destroyed, but because a very old assumption was gently set down. In Newton's world, space was an unmoving stage. Time was a shared clock for all beings. Objects moved within that frame, acted upon by invisible forces. Einstein looked at this picture and did not rush to reject it. He simply tilted his head as if listening for a different rhythm. What if space were not merely a place, but something that could change? What if time did not flow evenly for everyone, but differently depending on position and motion? And what if what we call force were only the way we sense the curvature of reality itself? Einstein did not offer quick answers. He moved slowly through thought experiments with a patience that bordered on meditation. As he later reflected, the most incomprehensible thing about the universe is that it is comprehensible. Yet this comprehensibility does not come from tightening the world into old frames. It comes from allowing those frames to soften. When gravity is no longer a force, it no longer pulls objects toward one another. Instead, it shapes the paths they follow. Space is no longer flat. Time is no longer neutral. Together, they become a living structure responding to the presence of matter and energy. And at the same time, something very deep happens in human thought. Reality is no longer rigid. In philosophy, moments like this are always healing. Much of our exhaustion comes from believing that the world is unyielding. When you believe everything is fixed, every law absolute, every path predetermined, you are forced to harden yourself just to exist. But if space can curve, if time can stretch, then perhaps life itself does not demand absolute rigidity. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote, "One must still have chaos in oneself to be able to give birth to a dancing star." Einstein did not speak of chaos in quite that way, but the spirit is close. He allowed a small measure of disorder to enter the old order so that a deeper structure could be born. In the night when you no longer need to control your thoughts, this idea may touch you very gently, that not everything needs to keep its shape, that sometimes asking a different question matters more than finding a new answer. When reality softens, the mind can soften with it. You do not need to know exactly how space curves. You do not need to understand how much time stretches. You only need to feel that the world is not resisting you. It adjusts around you just as you adjust around it. And in that slow mutual adjustment, there is no pulling, no forcing, only natural paths quietly revealing themselves. We do not need to go further yet. We can remain in this moment where an old question has been set down and a new way of seeing does not yet need a name. Reality begins to soften, and with it you are allowed to soften too, enough to breathe more deeply, enough for your inner space to feel wider. From here we will step into a new geometry of the universe, but tonight it is enough to know that the world is not as rigid as you once believed, and that by itself is already a form of rest. Curved space-time is the moment when language changes completely. From here on, the universe is no longer explained through forces, but listened to through geometry. The question is no longer who pulls whom, but how has the path been shaped. Mass and energy do not act as coercive agents. They leave traces in the structure of reality itself. And everything, including light, including time, simply follows those traces. On the philosophical level, this is a deeply healing shift. It removes the feeling of being forced, dragged, controlled. If motion is the consequence of geometry, then existence is no longer a struggle against external forces, but a drifting along a structure that has already been woven. When the question changes direction, when reality has begun to soften, the world no longer operates through invisible tugs. It operates through form. Einstein did not say that objects are pulled toward one another. He said they are moving along paths already laid out, paths curved by the very presence of mass and energy. Space-time from this point on is no longer a silent backdrop. It becomes the main character. Every star, every planet, every smallest particle leaves a very gentle imprint in the fabric of the universe. Not a scratch, not a crack, but a curvature. And every subsequent motion is simply a response to that curvature. In this world, nothing is forced to fall. No planet is compelled to orbit. They merely follow the most natural paths available to them. Geometry in this sense becomes the language the universe speaks without sound. In philosophy, the deepest languages are always those that require no commands. As Baruch Spinoza once wrote in Ethics, "Nothing in nature is random." A thing appears random only through the incompleteness of our knowledge. Curved space-time is not chaos. It is an order we have not yet learned to read. Imagine yourself walking across a vast surface. If the ground is flat, you walk straight. But if the ground is curved, your straight path naturally bends with the terrain. You do not need to know where the ground curves. Your body still walks, without hesitation, without confusion. The universe is the same. When a planet circles its star, it is not pulled by an invisible string. It is walking along a curved surface created by the star itself. When light bends as it passes a galaxy, it is not deflected by a force. It is following the geometry of space-time where it travels. And when time slows near a massive object, it is not being obstructed. It is simply moving along a longer path within that curved structure. In this way of seeing, there is no longer a confrontation between objects in space, no conflict between motion and order. Everything flows together. This carries a deep consolation. If your movement is not the result of an invisible pull, but the consequence of the terrain you inhabit, then perhaps the bends in your own life are not mistakes. They may simply be curves in a structure you have not yet seen in full. In Being and Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre once wrote, "Man is condemned to be free." But within the geometry of space-time, freedom no longer feels like a sentence. It feels like being allowed to drift along the shape of reality without resistance. In the night when you are no longer trying to control your thoughts, you may sense this clearly. Your breath does not need force to continue. It simply follows a rhythm already present. Your body does not need commands to rest. It simply finds the lowest point in the geometry of fatigue. And your mind is the same. There is no need to pull it toward silence. You only need to let it move along its most natural path tonight. Curved space-time teaches us something very gentle that the universe does not push. It shapes. And when you understand this even only as a feeling, you can loosen the idea that you must always be striving. You are moving within a geometry far larger than thought, deeper than worry. From here, the paths of the universe will begin to reveal themselves more clearly. But there is no need to hurry. Tonight, it is enough to know that you are not being pulled. You are being guided by the soft structure of reality itself. And within that guidance, sleep arrives quite naturally. Freefall and the principle of equivalence are where the universe whispers a gentle paradox. Gravity disappears at the very moment we stop resisting it. The imagined elevator is not a dry physical model, but a closed room of awareness, a place where heaviness and lightness, falling and drifting, no longer have clear boundaries. There, what we call force reveals itself as a sensation born of resistance, not as the essence of the world. Many of the weights we carry in life do not come from the fact that we are falling, but from the effort to stand still before a movement that is quietly inviting us to drift. Letting go is not loss. Letting go is a return to the natural path. After the geometry of the universe has come into view, after space-time has softened enough that we no longer feel pulled, Einstein offers a curious invitation to fall. Not to fall in panic, not to fall in loss of control, but to fall as a primordial state where every attempt to resist motion is gently set down. He asks us to step into an imagined elevator. The doors close, no windows, no external signs, only you and the quiet. The elevator begins to move. If it accelerates steadily through empty space, you will feel your body pressed against the floor. If it falls freely within a gravitational field, you will feel nothing at all. In that instant, two experiences that seem entirely different become indistinguishable. Einstein called this the principle of equivalence. But the name is less important than the feeling when everything falls together. Gravity vanishes, not because it is absent, but because there is no longer any resistance. In this view, gravity is not a hand pulling you downward. It is the path you are already on. The feeling of weight arises only when you try to stand still against a road that is inviting you to move with it. In inner life, this happens more often than we realize. We feel heavy not because life is unfolding, but because we are resisting a motion that has already begun. When you allow yourself to fall in the very gentle sense of no longer clinging to a fixed point, the heaviness quiets. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu wrote, "When I let go of what I am, I become what I might be." Einstein did not quote these words, but his elevator speaks the same truth in the language of the universe. In free fall, you are not forced to go anywhere. You simply stop being held back. Astronauts in orbit do not lose gravity because they have escaped Earth. They lose gravity because they are continuously falling together with their spacecraft. There is no pulling force, no support, only complete synchrony between the object and the path. In the night, when you lie very still and your body begins to release the last traces of tension, you are approaching this state. Your body does not need to be relaxed. It only needs to stop resisting fatigue. Your breath does not need to be controlled. It only needs permission to follow its natural rhythm. And your mind is the same. The gravity of thought, worries, plans, memories does not disappear because you push it away. It disappears when you stop standing still to resist its flow. In the Varieties of Religious Experience, William James wrote, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their attitudes of mind." Einstein altered his attitude toward the very idea of force, and from that shift, the entire universe grew lighter. The principle of equivalence does not teach us how to rise. It teaches us how to stop clinging. Free fall, in its deepest sense, is not the loss of ground. It is the recognition that the ground has always been there, and that we do not need to tense ourselves to hold on to it. When you fall together with the path, there is no force left to feel, no heavy, no light, only drift. And within that drift, sleep does not arrive as a state to be achieved. It arrives as the natural lowest point of a very old geometry. If in this moment you feel as though you are falling, allow it to happen. There is nothing to grasp, nothing to hold. Gravity will disappear when you stop resisting it. And in that very quiet instant, you may realize you are not falling out of the world. You are returning to the path you have always belonged to. Straight paths in a curved world mark a subtle transition from the feeling of falling to the feeling of walking, but walking in a world where the meaning of straight has quietly changed. Movement is released from the idea of coercion. An orbit is no longer the result of a force acting upon an object, but the expression of an invisible terrain. Objects are not forced to bend. They remain faithful to the straightest path possible within a world that is already curved. As a healing philosophical metaphor, this is profoundly powerful. Many of us believe we are being pushed into loops, repeating orbits of life, but perhaps we are not being pulled or forced at all. Perhaps we are simply walking the natural path of a geometry we have not yet seen. After free fall dissolves the sensation of weight, another movement begins to reveal itself, the movement of paths. Not the paths we draw on maps, not the paths we choose through willpower, but paths that already exist within the structure of space-time itself. In a flat world, a straight line is a simple promise. Straight is fastest, shortest, least deviated. But in a curved world, straightness becomes a gentler concept. Einstein called it a geodesic, the straightest possible path through a space that has already been bent. A planet is not pulled toward its star. There is no invisible string, no coercive hand. It is simply walking along the invisible terrain of space-time, like a person walking along a hillside without anyone pushing their back. From a distance, that motion appears as repetition, a closed orbit. But from within, it is only the next step placed exactly where the natural path leads. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nature does nothing uselessly. The geometry of the universe is the same. It does not force, it arranges." When you watch a planet circling endlessly around its star, you might think it is trapped. but perhaps it is simply being faithful to the shape of the space it inhabits. In inner life, we often reproach ourselves for familiar orbits, repeating relationships, looping thoughts paths that seem to have no exit. But what if we looked at these loops not as mistakes, but as geodesics? Not because we are weak, but because the space of experience is curved in a particular way. When space curves, going straight becomes an arc. This is not an excuse for standing still. It is a different invitation. Before changing direction, look carefully at the terrain. In Being and Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Freedom is what you do with what's been done to you." Einstein adds another layer. Freedom lies not only in choice, but in understanding the structure within which choice unfolds. A planet does not ask whether it should turn left or right. It does not need to decide. It only needs to exist honestly enough for the path to reveal itself. And that path, though curved, is still the straightest one the universe allows. As night settles in and your mind begins to slow, your thoughts also follow their own geodesics. You do not need to push them elsewhere. You do not need to pull them back to the beginning. Simply observe the shape of the space in which they are moving. Perhaps your thoughts are not bent. Perhaps the space of the mind carries a certain curvature shaped by memory, emotion, and what has not yet been named. In that space, straight motion looks like circling. But this is not wrong. It is simply honest. And within that honesty, a strange kind of peace appears, the peace of no longer forcing yourself to be straight in a curved world. As you lie still, now let your breath follow its own geodesic. No adjustment, no correction. Your breath does not need to be deeper. It only needs to be true to the present shape of the body. In the geometry of sleep, there are no shortcuts. There are only natural paths that lead from wakefulness into quiet. And if you feel that you are moving in circles, remember this. An arc is not a deviation in a curved universe. It is the form that a straight line must take. The planet is not being pulled. Neither are you. You are walking across an invisible terrain that has been curved for a very long time, and each slow step is not a loss of direction, but a sign that you are exactly where you belong. When even light must bend, a very special moment opens in the journey, the moment when what we once believed to be the straightest, the fastest, the freest of all things, light itself is forced to slow and change direction. Within the structure of this chapter, light is no longer a detached observer untouched by influence. It becomes an honest witness to the geometry of the universe. When light curves, we know space-time has curved. When light is deflected, we do not see a force at work, but the imprint of structure itself. Philosophically, this is a deeply healing shift. We often believe that whatever is bright within us, reason, good intentions, cherished memories, should always travel straight. This chapter gently suggests otherwise, even light must follow the terrain. Not because it is weak, but because reality is deeper than we imagine. Gravitational lensing, then, is not only a physical phenomenon. It is a subtle metaphor for how experience bends perception. We do not see things as they are, but as their light has traveled through countless curves before reaching us. After straight paths in a curved world, there is one thing that seems unavoidable: light. For a long time, humanity believed light was the final standard, the fastest, the straightest, untouchable. Light allows us to see, and so we quietly assume it is free from influence. And then the universe whispers something else very softly, very slowly. Even light must bend as it passes through a curved world, not because it is pulled, not because it is blocked, but because the space-time it swims through has taken on a different shape. When a massive star is present, the space around it dips ever so slightly. Light, faithful to its natural path, simply follows that terrain. From afar, we witness something strange, a star appearing not where it truly is. Not because light lies, but because it has traveled along a curved path. From this moment, gravitational lensing is born. The universe becomes a vast mirror, not flat, not truthful in the ordinary sense, but far more profound. In the world as will and representation. Arthur Schopenhauer wrote, "The world is my representation." That sentence sounds very different once we understand that every image we see has passed through a curved geometry. Perhaps what we see is not false, but it has been shaped by the path it took. Inner life unfolds in the same way. The memories we hold, the people we remember, the moments we believe we once saw clearly, are they still straight? Or has their light passed through curves of emotion, of loss of time? We often blame ourselves for no longer seeing things as we once did. But perhaps it is not the light within us that has changed. Perhaps the terrain we have crossed has curved. Einstein once wrote in Relativity, the special and the general theory, "Space and time are not conditions in which we live, but modes by which we think." If the way we think has curved, then the light of meaning must curve with it, and that is not a failure. Gravitational lensing allows us to see galaxies that would otherwise be too distant, too faint. Their light is bent, magnified, and delivered to our eyes after billions of years. Something once invisible becomes present precisely because of curvature. Perhaps the distortions in life are doing the same. Sorrow's long night's paths that seem misdirected, they may be bending the light so that something deeper can reach you. As night settles and you lie still in the dark, the light within the mind also slows. It loses its sharp edges. It no longer insists on straight lines. Only soft traces remain drifting like distant stars. You do not need to see clearly. Light does not need to be exact. It only needs permission to bend. In the universe, no light arrives without passing through some geometry. And within you, no understanding forms without passing through experience. When light curves, it does not lose its essence. It simply tells a longer story. The universe does not hide truth from us. It asks us only to read truth along curved lines. If in this moment everything within you feels blurred or slightly askew, remember this. Even light does not travel straight, and it still arrives. Let your eyes rest. Let the inner light follow its natural path. No need to correct its direction. No need to adjust it. In the curved mirror of the universe, you are not distorted. You are being seen from another depth. And within that gentle curvature, sleep arrives slowly, kindly, like a beam of light that has traveled very far only to come to rest here. When time no longer flows evenly, the journey moves from the geometry of space into the geometry of inner life itself. It begins with a small detail. A clock placed higher up runs faster. A difference so slight it is almost impossible to feel, yet enough to collapse the idea of a single shared stream of time for everyone. From this point on, time is no longer an objective flow moving uniformly through the world. It becomes part of geometry, something that can stretch, compress, slow down, or move more quickly depending on where we stand. Many people suffer not because they lack time, but because they measure their own rhythm against the rhythm of others. This chapter quietly loosens that knot. If time itself does not flow evenly, then there is no reason every life must keep the same pace. After light has learned how to bend, something even deeper begins to reveal itself: time. From a very young age, we are taught that time moves steadily. 1 second follows another. 1 minute is the same as every other minute. A day keeps the same rhythm for everyone. The clock on the wall never hesitates. The second hand advances with confidence, as if the universe has agreed upon a common beat. But when we look more closely, the universe whispers something else. A clock placed on a mountaintop runs faster than one at sea level. Not by much, only by a tiny fraction. Too small to feel with the body, yet large enough to dissolve the idea of absolute time. In the world of general relativity, time does not merely pass. It responds. It stretches and compresses with gravity, with the depth of space-time in which we stand. The closer one is to great mass, the more slowly time flows. The farther one moves from strong gravity, the lighter and faster time becomes. Time is no longer a flat river. It becomes a landscape. In Confessions, Augustine of Hippo once wrote, "What then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one that asketh, I know not." Perhaps this was because Augustine still lived within a world where time was imagined to be flat. Einstein moved more slowly. He allowed time to participate in the structure of reality itself. Time became a dimension that could curve, and once time curves, comparison begins to lose its meaning. There are days that feel endless yet pass within hours. There are years that vanish like a single breath. Not because we are weak, not because we have lost control, but because time never flowed evenly to begin with. In strong gravitational fields, time slows almost to a standstill. Near a black hole, a single moment can stretch longer than an entire human lifetime elsewhere. From a distance, everything still seems to move, but from within, motion nearly dissolves. Time becomes a local experience. In inner life, we have regions of gravity like this as well. Heavy memories, losses that have not settled, fears that have not yet been named. Their time does not move forward. It slows. It gathers. It holds us in one place for a very long time. And then we ask ourselves why we have not moved on. But that question assumes our time must flow the same way as everyone else's. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche wrote, "And all joy wants eternity." Perhaps this is because every moment carries its own rhythm, and joy, like sorrow, wishes to be fully lived within its own pace. General relativity does not ask you to be faster. It does not judge you for slowing down. It speaks only one quiet truth. The time you are living is valid within the geometry you inhabit. As you lie down now, the clock continues to run, but you do not need to follow it. Your breath has its own rhythm. Your body has its own rhythm. Your thoughts too trace their own paths within the space-time of the night. You do not need to pull sleep toward you. You do not need to hurry it along. Sleep arrives when your time has curved enough. In the geometry of the universe, no moment is wasted. There are only regions where time slows so that something may be absorbed more deeply. And perhaps the fact that you are here now listening to these very slow words does not mean you have stepped outside the flow. It may mean you are standing within exactly the necessary curve. Let time follow its own shape. Let the night stretch a little. You are not late. You are not behind. You are simply living within a geometry that clocks cannot measure. And within that geometry, sleep is not the end of the day, but the place where time temporarily stops asking anything of you. Black holes where curvature reaches its extreme are the point at which the journey touches the boundary of language itself. A black hole is not merely a physical object. It is a place where the model remains valid, but words are no longer sufficient. Light circling is not a tragedy, but a final act of fidelity. Light continues to follow its geodesic until the geodesic no longer opens onward. At that boundary, physics does not collapse. It simply stops speaking loudly. There are experiences that do not need to be explained, only gently set down and met with a silence that is not afraid. After time has learned how to slow, another boundary appears not far away, but very deep. A black hole, not loud, not explosive, not dramatic in the way stories often tell it. Just a region where curvature reaches its limit. There, space-time folds in on itself so completely that every path turns inward. No escape is not a threat. It is a precise, cool, and quiet description. Light, once the standard of freedom, slows here as well. Not because it is held back, but because there is no longer an opening ahead. Light circles as if considering and then disappears, not with sound, but with silence. That boundary is called the event horizon, not a wall, not a surface. Simply the place where every sentence that begins with return no longer makes sense. Physics does not die there, it lowers its voice. In Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus Ludwig Wittgenstein wrote, "Whereof one cannot speak thereof, one must be silent." A black hole is where that sentence becomes geometry. Not because nothing happens, but because what happens no longer fits our familiar language. In inner life, everyone has a black hole. Regions of memory we do not return to. Pains that cannot be told. Questions that reach the limits of endurance. We often fear these regions, fear being pulled in fear, never coming back out. But a black hole in the universe does not devour everything in haste. It simply is. Silent, stable, faithful to its geometry. An object falling into a black hole does not feel the moment of being captured. According to relativity itself, for the one who falls, there is no bell, no dividing line. Only the next step along a path that has curved so deeply that no alternative remains. In Being and Time, Martin Heidegger wrote, "Silence is an authentic mode of discourse." Perhaps this is because there are things that can only be held, not spoken. A black hole teaches us this, that not every experience requires light to be shone upon it. Not every question demands an answer. There are boundaries that only need to be respected. When night comes and your mind touches very deep regions, remember this silence is not failure, it is a state. In extreme gravity, time slows so much that to an outside observer, everything appears frozen. An object falling into a black hole seems to remain forever at the edge, never fully crossing. But for the object itself, motion continues. Two perspectives, two rhythms of time. No contradiction, only different frames of reference. Life is the same. Some may see you as stuck, but inside you are still moving. You have not stopped. You are simply within a very deep curvature of experience, and their light does not vanish. It simply does not return in the old way. A black hole is not the end of the universe. It is a reminder that the universe contains places not meant for speed, not meant for noise, only for stillness. As you close your eyes now, there may be thoughts that do not need to be resolved, that do not need illumination. Let them remain where they are. You do not need to enter them. You do not need to avoid them. Just know this silence does not swallow you. It holds you according to a different geometry. Within that geometry, there is no quick exit, no pressure to return, only a very gentle truth at the boundary where physics touches silence. Human beings, too, may be allowed to become silent with it. And within that silence, there is no fear, only being held like light, circling one last time, very slowly, very gently, before letting the night close without a single word. The expanding universe opens a movement opposite to a persistent human fear. The universe does not merely expand, it expands faster and faster. There is no hand pushing, no center, no clearly marked destination, only a quiet rhythm of widening. Growth does not always come from effort. Some motions arise from within the structure itself without coercion. After silence has touched its deepest edge, a very different motion begins, not falling inward, but opening outward. The universe is expanding, not because galaxies are fleeing one another, not because objects are being shoved away in panic, but because space-time itself is gently widening between them, like dots on a sheet of paper that do not move at all, and yet the distance between them increases as the paper is softly stretched. Here there is no center, no edge, no starting point to return to. The Big Bang in this view was not an explosion. It was an initial condition where every distance was zero, and from there geometry began to breathe out, very slowly, very evenly. In A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking wrote, "The universe doesn't allow perfection. Perhaps because the universe is not a closed thing, it opens. And stranger still, this opening does not slow, it accelerates. Space-time expands faster and faster, as if there were a background rhythm that requires no pulling force, no will. We call this dark energy a name for not knowing, a marker for mystery. But in terms of lived experience, it is something oddly familiar, opening without knowing why. In inner life, everyone has felt themselves expand. Seasons when the distance between you and the past gradually grows. Relationships that do not break, only drift farther apart. Not because anyone leaves, but because the space between two people has changed shape. We often grieve distance, but the universe does not treat distance as failure. It treats it as geometry doing its work. In The Phenomenology of Spirit, Hegel wrote, "The true is the whole." Perhaps the whole is not a gathering in, but the capacity for everything to have room. When space-time expands, it does not tear apart what already exists. It creates more space, space for light to travel, longer space for time, to stretch space for silence, not to become a black hole. After chapters that spoke of extreme curvature of places with no way out, this one whispers something different. Not every motion turns inward. Some motions exist simply so that everything can breathe. In the quiet of night, as you lie still in your small room, you may feel that things are expanding, thoughts, memories, breath. You do not need to hold them together. You do not need to gather them into a center. The universe does not do that. It allows galaxies to be farther apart every second and still calls it a structure. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Nature is content with little." Expansion is not ambition, it is enough room. The mysterious acceleration of the universe has no declared purpose, no published plan. It simply happens. And perhaps that is the hardest thing for human beings, to accept motions that do not require reasons. We want to know why. But the universe answers only with shape, the shape of distance, increasing the shape of the night, lengthening the shape of questions that do not need an ending. As you loosen now, do not try to pull everything close again. Do not force your feelings back into their proper places. Let them expand in their own rhythm. Sleep does not arrive through gathering. It arrives through a space wide enough. In the geometry of the universe, there is no final state, only an opening state. And within that state, you are not being left behind. You are simply at the precise distance the night requires. Let your own space-time loosen a little more. Let your thoughts drift farther apart. The universe is not afraid of far. It calls far the space where existence can breathe. And in this gentle expansion, sleep arrives not as a closing point, but as an opening, a place where you are allowed to rest within a universe that is breathing out very slowly. Ripples in reality mark the moment when movement is returned to silence. The universe is not still, it is simply very quiet. Gravitational waves do not resound like thunder. They pass through like the deep breath of space-time. What matters here is not collision, but aftershock, delicate distortions that stretch and release, leaving subtle traces of an event that occurred very far away, very long ago. Disturbances are not failures of stillness. They are evidence of connection. The universe vibrates because it is continuous. Human beings vibrate because they touch one another, even ever so lightly. After the universe has learned how to open, something else reveals itself, not light, not distance, but vibration. Ripples in reality, not loud, not bright, not seeking attention. Just the smallest deformations in space-time passing through the universe like a breeze without scent. Gravitational waves are born when massive bodies meet two black holes, spiraling together, two neutron stars colliding, a final dance before everything settles again. And yet what is strange is this: the waves carry no sound. They carry shape. Space-time trembles, stretches, and compresses very gently, very briefly, and then returns to itself. The universe is not still. It is simply very quiet. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu wrote, "Silence is a source of great strength. Perhaps true strength does not require volume." Gravitational waves pass through Earth without tipping over a glass, without shifting a star. They alter the distance between 2 points by less than the width of a proton, and that is enough. In inner life, we carry ripples like this as well. A passing remark, a sudden memory, a touch so light between two people. Nothing collapses. The world does not break. Only the shape of how we stand within it changes. We often think that stillness means nothing is happening, but the universe suggests otherwise. Stillness is when movement does not need to announce itself. Gravitational waves can travel for billions of light years without fading. They carry the story of an event that has already ended, yet its echo remains. In Being and Nothingness, Jean-Paul Sartre wrote, "Every consciousness is consciousness of something. Perhaps every vibration, too, is a vibration of something, of an encounter, of an ending, of a change in form." As night falls and you listen to the quiet of the room, do not rush to believe that nothing is moving. Your body still vibrates. Your breath still passes through. Time still flows along its own geometry. You are living within a sea of vibrations held very carefully by stillness. Gravitational waves remind us that the universe is interconnected. A collision far away still leaves its trace where you stand. And perhaps the vibrations within you are not noise. They are signals of connection. In Letters to a Young Poet, Rainer Maria Rilke wrote, "Try to learn to love the questions themselves. Gravitational waves are questions that require no answers. They only ask to be felt." As you close your eyes, now notice the smallest ripples, the rhythm of your heartbeat, the warmth in your hands, the support of the bed beneath you. Nothing dramatic, only presence vibrating softly. The universe does not ask you to be motionless. It only suggests that stillness does not exclude movement. Sleep does not arrive when everything stops. It arrives when every vibration finds its proper amplitude. In the geometry of night, waves do not break silence. They weave it. And within that fabric, you are not thrown off balance. You are held by billions of vibrations that have learned how to pass through without causing harm. If something within you is gently vibrating, let it move on. No need to name it, no need to correct it. The universe is not still, but it knows how to be quiet. And as you let yourself settle into that quiet rhythm, sleep does not mean switching off. It means blending into a wave that has traveled very far only to arrive here now. The boundary of the unknown is where the journey slows in a very particular way, not because it has reached an end, but because there is no longer a clear path forward. After listening to the universe vibrate, after sensing the stillness within motion, we arrive at the meeting point of the two greatest languages of science, general relativity and quantum mechanics. There, space-time, once soft curved and resonant, may no longer be smooth. There are places in thought, just as in the universe, where the most fitting response is to stop and listen. After the faint ripples, a boundary appears, not through light, not through vibration, but through the silence of understanding. This is where general relativity meets quantum mechanics. Two immense theories, each astonishingly accurate, each describing the universe with near-perfect precision, and yet unable to touch one another. On one side is smooth geometry, space-time, curved and continuous, gently shaped by mass and energy. On the other is the world of particles, discrete jumping, probability instead of path, uncertainty instead of certainty. When these two languages meet, the story does not continue. It pauses. At very small scales, space-time may no longer resemble a soft fabric. It may be rough, granular, broken, like a painting that looks seamless from afar, but when approached closely dissolves into countless tiny fragments that refuse to join into a curve. In physics and philosophy, Werner Heisenberg wrote, "What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning." Perhaps space-time is telling us the same thing, that the questions we carry have reached the limits of their own form. In inner life, we all encounter such boundaries. Questions without answers, emotions without names, experiences where language stands only at the edge. We often assume that not understanding is a lack, but the universe does not see it that way. The universe stops there calmly, respectfully, quietly. Space-time may not be smooth, but that does not make it less real. It only makes it deeper. In the Book of Disquiet, Fernando Pessoa wrote, "I am nothing. I'll never be anything. I couldn't want to be something." This is not despair. It is rest after reaching the far edge of the desire to understand. At this boundary, science does not offer answers. It offers honesty that there may exist a deeper theory not yet found, not yet named, not yet shaped, not because humanity is insufficient, but because reality has not yet allowed it. In philosophy, the unknown is not an empty space. It is an open one, where thought does not seal itself shut. As you lie listening to these words, you may be standing before such a boundary as well, something you do not yet understand about yourself, a question about life that does not require an answer now. You do not need to cross it. You do not need to decipher it. The universe does not push at places that are not ready. In the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu wrote, "To know that you do not know is the best." The boundary of the unknown is not the failure of knowledge. It is the resting place of awareness. When science pauses, it is not out of fear, but out of respect for the structure of what exists. Space-time may fracture at very small scales, but at the human scale, what matters is not the fragments, but how we stand before them. You do not need to assemble the picture tonight. You only need to view it from a distance wide enough that the details do not exhaust you. Sleep does not arrive when everything is understood. It arrives when the mind allows certain questions to remain as they are. In the geometry of the unknown, there are no wrong directions, only regions that do not yet need illumination. And perhaps it is there that a deeper theory awaits, not only of the universe, but of what it means to be human, waiting quietly, not to be conquered, but to be passed by gently. Let that boundary remain still in the night. Let the mind stop knocking. The universe has traveled very far to tell you just one thing. You do not need to know everything to be at peace. And in this gentle, unknowing sleep arrives like a silent agreement that for now, simply being here is enough. After all the curves we have passed through, after light has bent, time has slowed, and unnamed boundaries have been touched, one very simple truth remains: you belong to this geometry. Not as an observer standing outside it, not as a meaningless point lost in space, but as a real and living part of the structure that carries all motion. You do not stand outside the universe watching it operate. You are inside the very geometry that formed you. Every cell carries its own rhythm of time. Every breath gently curves the space around your chest. Every heartbeat is a small ripple in the fabric of space-time, endlessly bending and releasing. In Cosmos, Carl Sagan wrote, "We are a way for the universe to know itself." This sentence is not poetry. It is geometry. The universe does not merely contain you. It unfolds through you. When you feel sadness, it is not a deviation. When you feel tired, it is not a malfunction of the system. It is the way a part of the universe is adjusting its rhythm within a larger structure. You do not need to be correct. You do not need to be straight. You do not need to be fast. In a curved world, straightness is a relative idea. And in a living universe, every rhythm has its place. In Meditations, Marcus Aurelius wrote, That which is not good for the hive is not good for the bee. But the inverse is also true. The bee does not need to strain itself to prove its value to the hive. It only needs to move according to its own geometry. As you lie still now, your body is doing something very ancient, adjusting curvature. Muscles soften, breaths lengthen. The heartbeat slows not from laziness, but from alignment. In sleep, you do not leave the universe. You fit into it in a different way. The universe continues to bend very gently. Galaxies keep drifting. Light continues along its long, curved paths. Gravitational waves pass through like touches that leave no mark. And you are not forgotten within this motion. You are held by the same geometry that holds the stars. In the Phenomenology of Perception, Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote, "The body is our general medium for having a world. Your body is not a barrier between you and the universe. It is the point of contact. When you sleep, consciousness does not disappear. It simply steps back, making room for deeper rhythms that need no words, no understanding, only permission. If there are moments when you feel small, remember this small does not mean insignificant. A very small ripple is still part of the ocean. A very gentle heartbeat still participates in the greater structure. In the geometry of the universe, there is no outside. There are only regions of different motion, and sleep is one of those motions. It is not falling out of the world. It is being placed exactly where you belong. Let your eyelids grow heavy. Let your thoughts lose their sharp edges. There is nothing you need to hold on to, nothing more you need to follow. You have traveled far enough to recognize something very near you do not need to become a part of the universe. You already are. And as the night wraps around your body, as your heartbeat becomes a very small, very steady, very gentle ripple, the universe does not stop. But it does not leave you behind. It continues to bend softly, and it allows you to rest within that curve. There is no ending here. Only a deep ease, the knowing that whether you are awake or asleep, whether you remember or forget, this geometry still holds you in your proper place. And within that holding sleep arrives not as a final point, but as a natural return to the shared breath of the universe.